Most people don't fail because they lack talent. They fail because they wait. They wait for the new year. They wait for motivation. They wait for clarity. But the truth is, the future doesn't start in 2026. It starts with the decisions you make today. If you're serious about 2026, really serious, then this isn't about resolutions or shortcuts. It's about habits, the small, often invisible actions that quietly shape who you become. Because success is not an event, it's not luck, and it's not something that suddenly happens when the calendar changes. It's the result of what you practice consistently, especially when no one is watching. Today, I want to talk about 10 habits, not because they're trendy, but because they work. Habits that don't just change what you do, they change who you are becoming. So the question isn't, what do I want in 2026? The real question is, who do I need to be starting now? Let's begin. Most people begin with a checklist. A car they want to buy, a title they want on a business card, a number they want in their bank account. They start with outcomes because outcomes are visible. They're easy to imagine. They give us something concrete to chase. But outcomes are the weakest place to start because they don't tell us how to behave when things get hard, boring, or uncertain. When you start with what you want to achieve, you focus on moments. When you start with who you want to become, you focus on identity. And identity is what drives behavior long after motivation disappears. Think about it this way. Two people can have the same goal, get fit. One of them sees fitness as something they want to accomplish. The other sees being healthy as part of who they are. The first person goes to the gym when they feel inspired. The second person moves their body because that's what someone like them does. Same goal. Completely different results. Who you believe you are quietly determines what you say yes to and what you say no to. It shapes how you spend your time, how you respond to setbacks, and how you define progress. Achievements come and go. Identity stays. If you say, I want to be successful in 2026, your brain immediately asks, what do I need to get? More skills, more money, more recognition. But if you say, I want to become the kind of person who earns trust, who shows up consistently, who does the work even when it's uncomfortable, the question changes. Now it becomes, how does that person act today in small moments with no applause? The most dangerous trap is believing that once you achieve something, you'll transform into someone new. That once you reach a milestone, confidence will arrive. Discipline will arrive. Clarity will arrive. But it doesn't work that way. We don't rise to the level of our goals. We fall to the level of our habits, and habits are expressions of identity. This is why chasing motivation rarely works. Motivation is emotional. Identity is behavioral. You don't need to feel motivated to act in alignment with who you believe you are. You simply act. When your self-image changes, your standards change. And when your standards change, your decisions change. Someone who sees themselves as reliable doesn't look for excuses. Someone who sees themselves as a learner doesn't avoid failure. Someone who sees themselves as a leader doesn't wait for permission to take responsibility. Becoming comes before achieving. Always. If you want a different future, you don't need a dramatic reinvention. You need a quiet redefinition. A simple sentence you can answer honestly, who am I becoming if I keep doing what I'm doing now? That question is uncomfortable because it removes the illusion of someday. It forces you to accept that the future is being built in ordinary moments. How you prepare when no one is checking. How you respond when things don't go your way. How you treat commitments that don't come with immediate rewards. When you anchor your habits to identity, they stop feeling like chores. Reading isn't something you force yourself to do, it's what a curious person does. Planning your day isn't discipline, it's how a responsible person thinks. Saying no isn't selfish, it's how a focused person protects what matters. This shift also changes how you measure progress. Instead of asking, did I win today, you ask, did I act like the person I want to become? That question is available to you every single day, regardless of results. You may not close the deal. You may not see growth immediately. But you can always choose alignment, and alignment compounds. The world celebrates achievements, but it's built by identities. By people who decided, often quietly, to become dependable, to become thoughtful, to become resilient long before anyone noticed their results. These are the people who don't panic when timelines shift, because their sense of self isn't tied to a deadline. They know that if they keep behaving like the person they respect, outcomes will eventually follow. If you're serious about the future you say you want, stop asking what you need to get and start asking what you need to practice. Stop designing goals and start designing yourself. Because when pressure comes, when uncertainty hits, when motivation fades, you won't fall back on what you want. You'll fall back on who you believe you are. And that belief is being reinforced right now in the smallest choices you make, in the conversations you avoid or engage in whether you keep promises you made to yourself when no one is watching. We live in a world that celebrates extremes, overnight success, viral moments, intense bursts of effort that look impressive from the outside. We admire the sprint, the all-nighter, the sudden transformation. But what we don't see and rarely applaud is the quiet power of showing up again tomorrow. Intensity feels productive because it's emotional. It gives us a rush. It makes us feel like we're finally doing something. We decide to change everything at once. Wake up at 5 a.m., exercise every day, read 2 books a week, fix our mindset, fix our life, and for a few days, maybe even a few weeks, we do, until life interrupts, until energy drops, until the excitement fades. And when intensity disappears, so does the habit. Consistency works differently. It's not exciting. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't rely on mood or motivation. It relies on commitment. On the decision to do a little, even when you don't feel like it. Especially when you don't feel like it. Anyone can be intense for a short period of time. It doesn't require much discipline. It requires emotion. Consistency requires something deeper. It requires trust. Trust that small actions matter. Trust that progress is happening even when you can't see it yet. Think about how trust is built between people. Not through grand gestures once in a while, but through reliability over time. Showing up when you said you would. Doing what you promised you'd do. Again and again. The same rule applies to the relationship you have with your goals, and more importantly, with yourself. When you act consistently, you send yourself a signal. You tell yourself, I am someone who follows through. And every time you repeat that behavior, the signal gets stronger. This is how confidence is built. Not from winning big moments, but from keeping small promises. Intensity asks, how much can I do today? Consistency asks, what can I sustain? One burns you out. The other carries you forward. The people who succeed long term are rarely the most intense people in the room. They're the most reliable. They don't do everything. They do the important things regularly. They understand that missing once is an event, but missing twice is the beginning of a pattern. Consistency also removes decision fatigue. When something becomes part of your routine, it no longer requires negotiation. You don't debate whether to do it. You don't wait to feel ready. You've already decided. This frees up mental energy for thinking, creating, and leading instead of constantly starting over. There is a misconception that going slow means lacking ambition. In reality, going slow is often the most ambitious choice you can make because it means you're planning to stay in the game. You're not trying to impress anyone. You're trying to last. Look at anything meaningful that grows over time. A business, a career, a relationship. None of them are built on intensity alone. They're built on steady attention, on maintenance, on showing care even when it feels routine. Consistency is how values turn into behavior. It's easy to say you value learning. It's harder to read 10 pages every day. It's easy to say you value health. It's harder to choose movement regularly instead of occasionally. Values without consistent action are just opinions. And consistency doesn't mean perfection. It means return. You will miss days. You will fall off track. The difference is what you do next. Intensity says, I've failed, so what's the point? Consistency says, I missed one, I'll be back tomorrow. This mindset changes how you see setbacks. They stop being evidence that you're incapable and start being reminders that progress isn't linear. The goal is not to avoid failure. The goal is to shorten the distance between falling off and getting back on. In the long run, consistency compounds. Not dramatically at first, quietly, almost invisibly. Until one day, the gap between someone who did a little every day and someone who did a lot once in a while becomes impossible to ignore. The problem is, most people quit in the invisible phase. They don't see results fast enough, so they assume nothing is happening. But just because progress is slow doesn't mean it's weak. In fact, slow progress is often the strongest kind because it's built on habits that don't collapse under pressure. If you want a future that looks different from your present, you don't need to push harder for a week. You need to show up more often. You need to choose actions that fit into your life instead of taking it over. Actions that you can repeat on good days and bad days. Consistency is not about doing more. It's about doing enough long enough to become someone new. Discipline is often misunderstood. We picture rigid routines, forced effort, and a life stripped of enjoyment. We imagine discipline as punishment, as something we endure in order to get what we want later. But real discipline has nothing to do with suffering for its own sake. It's not about denying yourself happiness. It's about choosing meaning over comfort. Comfort is easy to understand. Comfort feels good now. It asks very little of us. Stay where you are. Do what you've always done. Avoid discomfort, avoid risk, avoid effort. Comfort whispers that tomorrow will be a better time to start, that rest is deserved, that one more delay won't matter. And in the moment, comfort almost always sounds reasonable. Meaning sounds different. Meaning doesn't shout. It doesn't promise immediate rewards. It asks harder questions. What kind of person do you want to respect when you look back on this season of your life? What values do you want your actions to prove, not just your words? Meaning is not about how you feel right now, but about what your choices are building over time. Discipline lives in that space between the two. It's the ability to pause when comfort is calling and ask whether this choice aligns with the life you say you want. It's not about being extreme. It's about being intentional. Every day, you face dozens of small decisions. Do you do the easy thing or the meaningful thing? Do you scroll or reflect? Do you avoid the conversation or address it? Do you keep the promise you made to yourself or explain it away? None of these decisions feel life-changing on their own. And that's why they're so powerful. Short-term comfort is seductive because it's immediate. Long-term meaning requires patience. And patience is difficult in a world designed to reward impulse. We are surrounded by tools and systems that make comfort faster and easier than ever. Entertainment on demand, food without effort, distractions without limits. None of these things are inherently bad. The problem begins when comfort becomes the default and meaning becomes optional. Discipline is what prevents that drift. It's easy to think that disciplined people have more willpower. In reality, they have more clarity. They've spent time deciding what matters to them. So when a choice appears, they're not negotiating from scratch. They already know what they stand for. Discipline is less about forcing yourself and more about remembering yourself. When your actions don't match your values, tension builds. You feel it as guilt, frustration, or restlessness. Not because you're failing, but because something inside you knows you're capable of more. Discipline is the act of honoring that inner standard even when no one else is watching. Choosing long-term meaning doesn't always feel good in the moment. Waking up early to work on something that won't pay off immediately rarely feels exciting. Saying no to distractions can feel like missing out. Holding yourself accountable can feel heavy. But meaning has a different kind of reward. It gives you self-respect. And self-respect lasts longer than comfort ever will. Comfort makes life easier. Meaning makes life fuller. There is a reason regret is usually tied to what we didn't do, not what we did. We rarely regret the effort we made to become better. We regret the moments we chose comfort and told ourselves it didn't matter. Discipline reduces future regret by asking you to carry a little discomfort now instead of a lot of disappointment later. This doesn't mean you never rest or enjoy life. Rest can be meaningful when it's chosen intentionally, not used as an escape. Comfort becomes a problem only when it replaces purpose. Discipline helps you tell the difference. People often wait to feel disciplined before they act. But discipline is not a feeling. It's a decision. And like all decisions, it becomes easier with practice. Each time you choose meaning over comfort, you strengthen that muscle. Each time you avoid the choice, it weakens. Discipline also builds trust with yourself. When you repeatedly do what you said you would do, you stop doubting your own intentions. You stop making promises you don't keep. This trust becomes a foundation. From it comes confidence, not the loud kind, but the quiet kind that doesn't need validation. Long-term meaning is rarely dramatic. It shows up in routines, in preparation, in consistency, in doing the work when it's boring, slow, or uncertain. Comfort wants to protect you from discomfort. Meaning wants to grow you through it. The future you imagine is not created by the things you do when it's easy. It's created by the choices you make when comfort and meaning are both available and you deliberately choose the harder one. Not because it's hard, but because it matters. We like to believe that our behavior is driven by motivation. That if we just want something badly enough, we'll act differently. But motivation is unreliable. It rises and falls. It depends on mood, energy, and circumstance. And yet, there are people who seem to do the right things even when they don't feel inspired. The difference is not desire. It's environment. Your environment is everything around you that influences your behavior without asking permission. The spaces you spend time in, the people you interact with, the systems you live inside of, the cues that nudge you towards certain actions and away from others. Most of the time, these influences operate quietly in the background, shaping your choices before you even realize a choice is being made. When people struggle to change a habit, they often blame themselves. They say they lack willpower or discipline. But willpower is not designed to fight your surroundings all day long. If your environment constantly pulls you in the opposite direction, the struggle will feel endless. Change becomes exhausting not because you're weak, but because you're swimming upstream. Look at how easily your behavior changes in different settings. The same person can be focused in one place and distracted in another, disciplined around certain people and careless around others. This is not hypocrisy. It's human nature responding to cues. Environment answers the question before you ask it. If your phone is within reach, you check it. If unhealthy food is visible, you eat it. If your workspace is cluttered, your thinking often is too. These are not moral failures. They are predictable responses to design. The most effective people don't rely on constant self-control. They design their environment to make the right behavior easier and the wrong behavior harder. They reduce friction where they want action and increase friction where they want restraint. This is why motivation fades but habits stick. Motivation tries to override your environment. Habits work with it. Think about leadership for a moment. A good leader doesn't just tell people what to do. They create conditions where the right behavior becomes natural. Culture is simply a shared environment. And culture, more than rules or speeches, determines how people actually behave. The same principle applies to your personal life. If you want to read more, place books where you can see them. If you want to think more clearly, remove distractions from your workspace. If you want to be around ambition, spend time with people who raise your standards. These are not dramatic changes, but they are powerful. Your environment also includes your digital world. What you consume shapes how you think. Constant noise trains your brain to avoid depth. Endless comparison erodes satisfaction. Information without intention creates anxiety instead of insight. Curating what you allow into your attention is one of the most underestimated forms of self-discipline. People often say they'll change once they feel ready, but readiness is often the result of environmental support, not a prerequisite for it. When your surroundings support the behavior you want, action feels lighter. Momentum builds faster. This is why removing a negative influence is often more effective than adding a positive one. You don't always need more motivation. Sometimes you just need fewer obstacles, fewer distractions, fewer excuses built into your daily life. Your environment also affects your identity. When you repeatedly act a certain way in a particular setting, you begin to associate that behavior with who you are. Over time, the environment doesn't just shape what you do. It shapes what you believe about yourself. This is why change often starts with a move, a new routine, or a shift in social circles. Not because the person suddenly changed internally, but because the external signals changed. New cues created new behaviors, and new behaviors reinforced a new identity. If you want to grow, pay attention to what your environment is quietly teaching you. What behaviors does it reward? What behaviors does it make difficult? What does it normalize? Because what feels normal eventually feels acceptable, and what feels acceptable eventually becomes automatic. You don't need perfect conditions. You need intentional ones. Small adjustments compound. A cleaner space, a clearer calendar, boundaries with people and platforms that drain you. Structures that support focus instead of fighting it. Stop asking why you're not motivated and start asking what around you is shaping your behavior. Because when the environment is aligned with your values, progress stops feeling like a fight and starts feeling like a natural response to the world you've chosen to live in. Goals are easy to